Hello, my friends. I am excited today to talk about a very powerful topic. And it's super important that we acknowledge and connect with a powerful essence, energy, emotional state that we might sometimes bypass. And it's called forgiveness. And the reason I wanted to talk about this is because sometimes it can be a little bit sneaky. We might think we've forgiven and that we've let go of something, oh no, that doesn't bother me anymore. I don't care about it or whatever. And we think that we've actually forgiven, but there's still an essence in us that is holding on to some form of either blame or belief that what happened shouldn't have happened. And I wanted to speak before I dive into forgiveness itself and what that looks like to truly let go and forgive. I wanted to talk about the consequences of unforgiveness, because the reason that we forgive is really for us, right? Because if we are holding on to blame or unforgiveness, meaning we don't ever want to talk to that person because we just hate them so much because of what they did or whatever, it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die, right? You've heard that term. Because the unforgiveness is a dense energy inside of us that doesn't fuel our greatest good. And the other person may not even be thinking about it, may not even be focused on it, but with you holding on, it is like infiltrating poison inside your body. And it shows up in ways you may not even recognize. It's sneaky. You might be short-tempered or snippy, and you don't even realize that it's this thing that is still being held on to. I remember I spoke to a gentleman at an event, and he stood up and he was like 400 pounds. And he said, my mother lives a few blocks down the street from me, and I never visit her. And I'm not mad at her. I honestly just don't care. I don't think there's anything to forgive. I really just don't care. I never visit her. I don't go by there. It doesn't bother me, and, we had rapport, and I said, with all due respect, my friend, you're wearing your unforgiveness. And I know he had a lot of pain, and I know, and in that moment, he really received, it was him being witness to how this is showing up in his life in a way that he hadn't even identified or acknowledged. And, and so that unforgiveness showed up in different ways and with women in his life. And he had 2 daughters, and, so there was definitely a lot there. And so sometimes we don't realize, we think that it doesn't matter or that we've forgiven, but we're still holding on to the story. And I want to share with you a story of a massive, incredible story of forgiveness. And you could actually find it if you Google her, but her name is Immaculée Ilbagiza. And she was a lady that survived the Rwanda genocide. And if you Google her, she's got a YouTube video. You'll see her story. And she was also in a documentary called The Power of the Heart, which is phenomenal, where she really tells the story. And to cut it short, she was in a small bathroom hiding with 6 other ladies in a small bathtub while people were getting macheted left and right, including her family. And she actually knew one of the guys that was running around calling out her name, wanting to find her. And she was filled with so much rage. I believe, if I remember correctly, my memory, I believe she was there for 90 days. If you can imagine. And it was a pastor's home, and they would eat out of the trash cans, whatever was left over. I mean, just crazy, right? And so she would read the Bible to calm the nerves of the other ladies that were in there with her. And she would get to that point where it said, "Forgive those who trespass against us," and she could not read it. She felt herself with so much rage, knowing that her whole family was macheted to death, and that this person was out there doing this to others. And there was 2 moments of her story that really struck out to me. Obviously, the whole story was profound. But there was a moment where she was filled with so much anger and so much rage, and completely justifiable, right? This is just such an act of cruelty. And she saw a vision, and on the left side she saw faces of people that have done massive harm, like Hitler or Charles Manson or the Night Stalker, like all these people that have done these heinous things. And then on the right, she saw Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, like Christ, like she saw all these different images. And the voice that she heard in that moment was, which side are you going to choose? And in that moment, she realized that her rage and her anger was actually fueling the dark energy, and it wasn't where she wanted to live. And in that moment, she made a decision to release it. And from that moment on, she was able to read the Bible fully, and she forgave, and she chose that. And the second part that was super profound was after the fact. She went to the prison where this guy that she knew macheted her family was in, and the guard that let her in gave her a 2x4 and basically said, like, I'll guard the door, basically saying, have at it, right? Do whatever you will with this 2x4 and this guy that I'm bringing in. So he comes in and he sits down and looks across the table at her with a look of like disgust, like, what are you going to say to me, you know? And she looks at him and looks at the 2x4, and you see this moment like, oh my God. And she looks up and stands up and looks right in his face, and she goes, I forgive you. And the look on his face was like shock, like he just got sucker punched is what it looked like. Like he could not believe the greatest superpower that she could give him in that moment was forgiveness. And it shocked him. And the guard heard and came in furious with her. Like, what in the world are you doing? Do you know what this man has done? And he was so livid. But that was the greatest thing that she could give. And he ended up kicking her out of the prison cell or whatever. But I thought, wow, like what a profound expression of forgiveness, true forgiveness. And now she's a speaker, you know, she goes around telling the story so that we can bring forgiveness in a very profound way. And, you know, like her, I've had to find the depths of my own being to be able to find forgiveness for the actions my father took, or my brother was murdered when he was 29, I was 28, and it was a senseless murder. It was a love triangle. My brother was dating a young lady, and he did not know that she was engaged previously. And the gentleman that she was engaged to wanted her back. And my brother had only been dating her a couple of months, and he was calling her, and she would tell him, no, I don't want you back. I found somebody better than you. He's better in bed. He smells better than you. She was saying it because all of this came out in the court. There was a week-long trial, which was like one of the hardest weeks of my life. Where she offered this testimony and basically loaded the gun. The guy kind of just went off the deep end, and he created a ruse, started to figure out where my brother was, where he worked, and he went to his work, pretended that his car was broken down, and asked my brother for a ride. My brother agreed. He took him 3 blocks to a residential area and shot him. Senseless, stupid, like absolutely so unacceptable and so just not warranted. And I mean, it was devastating. And in that moment back then, if you would have asked me to find the gift in that, I might have punched you in the nose. I turned my back on God, on my faith. I was so angry and so furious. I thought, what if there is no God? What if there's nothing? What if you just get buried 6 feet under with worms crawling out your eye holes? I mean, I literally was shouting this at the top of my lungs, like there is no good in this. He was such a good human being, and he was my only safety growing up. And you know, with my father coming into my room, like it was like he was my safety. He would walk me to school, hold my hand. At night when our neighbors upstairs would get in fights, we lived in an apartment complex, he would hold my hand. Like we had twin beds, and he would hold my hand until I could fall asleep because I was so scared. And sometimes he'd fall asleep first and I'd be like freaking out. So I'd crawl out of bed and I'd crawl in bed with him and I'd just sleep next to him. And I always felt protected and always safe with him. If I liked a boy at school, I would tell my brother to tell him, because I was very happy living in his shadows. In school, nobody knew me as Jessie. They knew me as Oscar's little sister. And I was very happy with that. And what I now know is that God had different plans for me. It wasn't until 2 years later, after my brother's passing, that I stumbled across a small little box of his belongings that I ended up with. And in this time in my life, I was in an abusive marriage, going through my own stuff. I didn't know anything about personal development. I didn't know anything about any kind of, understanding that I was even living with shame, or that I was living with any, I didn't know what to even call my emotions. And I looked in this box, and in this box was notes from his therapy sessions. There was books on personal development. There was Codependent No More was one of the books in there I'll never forget. And in that moment, as I'm learning all these things about my brother after the fact, I heard his voice crystal clear. And he said, Jess, this is for you to do, not me. And I did not know what that meant in that moment, but I never forgot it. It never left me. And what I now know is that whenever I serve somebody in grief, I honor my brother's life. I had to find the celebration of the 28 years that I had him. And I had to look back at the beautiful moments and being children and laughing and, and doing all the things that kids do, playing with GI Joes, and cherish every moment that I had with him, and live my life now with purpose of serving people not have to suffer. Because if you go around saying that shouldn't have happened, right? If you say that, like Byron Katie, she says, if you walk around saying that shouldn't have happened, she says, well, it should have, because it did. And when you argue with reality, you lose 100% of the time. And the truth of the matter is, my brother is no longer here. There's not a day that doesn't go by that I don't think of him and who he would be to my children and how I would love to talk to him. But if we don't find the gift, we only remember the pain. And then we literally handcuff ourselves to suffering. We're going to experience pain in our lives, but suffering is a choice, and it's an option. We don't have to live in suffering. It's not like there's nobility in me holding on to that shouldn't have happened. I have to understand that things are in divine order. And I know that some of you have been through some very heinous things, and I totally understand. But our suffering comes on the other side of unforgiveness, of not being able to release it and find the gift. Now, for me in my journey with my father, I used to condemn myself, and I used to believe that I was something to be ashamed of, and I was gross and I was filthy and no one would ever want me because I'm damaged goods now. Here's the thing though, my father behaved, I made meaning about who I now was. And I would judge myself. I would judge myself for not fighting, not kicking, not screaming, not spitting, not peeing myself. Like, why didn't I do more? I literally would look at pictures of myself as a little girl and be angry at her for not fighting him off. And I'm like, wow, like I was walking around judging myself so profoundly. And look, forgiveness doesn't justify or make the actions of someone right. It just releases you of holding on to a dense energy that doesn't serve you. blaming my father for the story I wrote does not serve me. He, God bless him, had remorse. And what's beautiful is that 2 weeks before he passed, he had a slight form of dementia. And so he would kind of go in and out of lucidity. But there was a moment where I was with him by myself, and he had a clear moment. And he said to me, "Jessie, I wish I could have been the father you deserved." And without hesitation in that moment, I said, "Dad, you were perfect. You were exactly who I needed you to be so that I could be who I am today. And I am committed and convicted to help human beings not live in suffering. I am committed to helping people free themselves from the pain and suffering of whatever happened to you, the trauma, the pain, the hurt. And I'm so convicted to helping you write the new story. Because if I'm witness to Jessie, the little girl now, and I go back to those moments, I see her as a beautiful girl who still showed up and was kind and minded her manners and was a good girl, who still showed up resilient, who still was creative at trying to build traps when her father was coming in, right? And I look at her and I see the courage it took to still be a good girl. I see the resilience in her to get back up after wiping her tears. I see that part of the story because that's just as true. Again, if we don't seek the gift, we only remember the pain, and both are available. We're not taught to notice what's right. We're taught to notice what's wrong. The news is constantly infiltrating man's inhumanity to man. But the bad things that happen are true. It doesn't justify the behavior. It doesn't make it right. It just makes it so. It happened. But there's another story. There's another story of the beauty of that little girl. And when you're able to fall in love with that, you can release any blame. And you fall in love with yourself from a way that you can never unsee the beauty of that. And now you see humanity with a different set of lenses. So my friends, I offer a 4-step process to forgiveness. Ask yourself, have you truly forgiven? Have you truly released that shouldn't have happened? And again, I know some of you have been through some really, really heavy things. I understand, and I'm so sorry. I really am. Like, nobody should have to endure some of the things that you guys have endured. However, we must see this as the divine choreography of our lives, because if you're still here, you're still alive, you're still showing up in kindness, you're still serving humanity on whatever level by your love, then God bless you. Like, there's a beauty inside of you, a divinity that is a result of all of that. So go back to the moments where you were most hurt and see yourself like a separation, like almost as a loving parent, and see, like, number one is go back to the moment. Number two is go see the person, see the experience. What were you wearing? Be fully present, but see yourself on the outside watching it like a movie. And as you see that painful moment for you, I'm going to invite you to see the other story of the resilient, beautiful soul that was in that arena, the one that endured that pain but got back up, the one that cried herself to sleep but got back up and was still a good girl or a good boy. And fall in love with that aspect of you, because that's equally true. And when you're able to find the gift, which is step 3, when you find that gift in the adversity, in the pain, and you grab that from the story, you can truly forgive. Because then you understand that it was all in divine order. It was the divine choreography of your life. It was scripted and it happened. And from that point on, you can now live in a surrendering blame, surrendering that it shouldn't have happened. And you can actually truly forgive and let it go. So you are massively cleansed and you are no longer judging not only the person that hurt you or the situation that hurt you or caused you trauma, but you're able to forgive yourself for writing a story about who you now think you are because of what happened, like I did. I was now gross and filthy and nobody would want me. I wrote that story. And I also get to release it in the moment that I recognize the other story. So that's my 4-step process. Number 1, go back to the moment. Number 2, observe from the lenses of a parent. And number 3, find the gift. And number 4, forgive. And I invite you to use the Hawaiian Ho'oponopono prayer, which is, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you. And say that over and over and over and over and over and over again until you really feel it releasing from your body. And I promise you, on the other side of forgiveness, there is such a glory, there's such a beauty, and there's an embrace of yourself and the beauty of who you were in the context of your pain. So that's it, my friends. Please check in with yourself. Have you truly forgiven? Sometimes we think we have, and we don't realize that our pain is showing up in other ways, in other people, because we haven't truly let it go. Okay? Mwah. I love you. Until next time.